Hudson has its own breed of dogs too. They're called river rat lap dogs.
You have to take a ferry to to while away your time, just to sit around.
Oh.
It starts at 6.
Yeah, these guys inside are from here and everything.
There's a ferry which goes to the opposite side, right?
There is. I don't know how regularly it.
I didn't know there would be so many people here. Usually people don't show up till 5:30 or 6 or 6:30. But
I'm Eric. I came from England. I'm only writing about the troubadours.
oh yeah.
And I got a message for you from Barbara Ding,
Uh-huh.
who said that she got your copy of your letter to Harry Belafonte and loves the idea and is going to spread the ideas around.
I think with modern methods of communication, things can be done that have been impossible in the age of sail and in the age of paper and print,
Yeah,
even 20 years ago.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
Anything I have to say, Cole, Mark?
you tell me where you want me to sit here.
Oh yeah, right there.
And so did that inspire that?
Well, when he went into the hospital, I went in what I think is a more practical solution. I am a big follower of Dr. King, and he says violence simply increases more violence. With hate, you can kill the hater, but you do not kill hate, you just increase hate. And darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that.
I want to wish you a happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
How was your birthday?
Oh, they come every year. I turn the telephone off so I don't have to answer it every 5 minutes.
That's why you didn't. You were busy all day when I called you.
That's right.
Did you do anything to celebrate your birthday this year?
I didn't expect it, but my wife and daughter invited 6 or 7 friends in. So we had my wife and her son and her husband and my wife's second cousin and some lefty friends from down the road.
For dinner or?
For dinner. And I'm a foodaholic, so I ate too much. Been trying to make up for it the last 2 days.
Still feel good, or do you feel another year older?
Well, in general, I feel better than most people, 87 years old, but about 5 weeks ago, I was cleaning out the maple syrup pan and climbed up on the rig and fell and bashed my leg in, and it swelled up like a grapefruit. My whole lower part of my right leg. I couldn't stand without terrible pain. I crawled on my back to the toilet and crawled back to bed and put my foot up in the air. But now it's 97% okay, I'd say. I can.
Looks like you're getting along fine
Yeah.
right now. The Lyme disease doesn't bother you anymore or anything like that?
No, well, except that my memory's lousy. I can remember a song that I learned 70 years ago, but I can't remember the name of somebody that I know very well. I go up to someone and say, John, I've known you 40 years, but what's your last name? And I'd forgotten Eric's name over here, or your name, Mike.
Yeah,
You gave me a last name, but I can't remember it.
I'll give you my card if you like.
I'll forget where I put the card.
You said you don't have song, like you had hundreds of songs in your head and now it's down to dozens, but you still remember a lot of songs, don't you?
Well, if my tongue gets started on it, as you know, there's a muscle memory. Like you can remember how to ride a bicycle 50 years after you learned it. And so once my tongue gets started to sing it, my tongue tells me what the next word is.
Does that work all the time?
No, not all the time.
How often do you perform now?
Oh, every week or two I'm singing somewhere around here, up the river, down the river. It might be in church or at a funeral or a wedding or birthday party. This is once a month here. But I don't give 2-hour concerts like I used to.
You give small concerts now?
No, even concerts. I sing a few songs here with somebody else. I'm going to help a guy get elected, I hope. Hope he gets elected. And Natalie Merchant will be there, and Jackson Brown, and a batch of others I haven't seen for years. So I said I'd come down and sing a few songs.
Who's that?
His name is John Hall. He used to be leader of a band called Orleans. And he's running against Sue Kelly in Westchester. This is a very northern part of her election district. I'm actually sorry for a lot of these people who are going along with W. They'll be apologizing for this in the late years of their life.
You know John Hall though, right?
Yeah, I've known him for 30 or 40 years. He and his wife wrote a very good song against nuclear power.
And Kurt, you also said that your voice isn't what it was.
Oh no, I can't sing much now. I used to be able to sing high and low. Now I have a growl somewhere in between. What I do these days mainly is to pick a tune. Say, I'm out of tune. So you all know this tune, I'll give you the words. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, as I was walking, they all sing it. I saw above me, I saw above me, endless skyway, that endless golden valley, I saw, so on.
And they sing,
And they sing the song and I accompany them and give them the words. In church they call this lining out the hymn. It's an old technique. Back in the days when people couldn't afford hymn books, the preacher would line out the hymn. There's an old church joke. He says he couldn't find his glasses. And he says, my eyes are dim, I cannot see. And they all start saying, my eyes are dim, I can't. No, he says, I have not brought my specs with me. I have not brought my specs with me.
Does it feel good that I heard one of the songs that the Weavers used to do? I heard Bruce Springsteen doing it on the radio this week. Does that
Well,
feel good that this?
It's a great honor to have a famous singer like that sing songs that I helped introduce or reintroduce. They were, Old Dan Tucker, the song he starts off with, was the #1 hit of the year 1844. Dan Emmett wrote it, and 6 years later he wrote Dixie. 5 years after he wrote it, Stephen Foster had the big hit with Oh Susanna. But Old Dan Tucker is a great song. Old Dan Tucker is a fine old man, washed his face in a frying pan, combed his hair with a wagon wheel, died with a toothache in his heel. Get out the way, Old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper, so on. And I think Dan Emmett would have been amazed and pleased to hear Bruce sing it out in his great voice with drums and horns and everything.
Are you pleased to hear it? I mean, are you pleased to have this album out and to have these songs reintroduced to another generation?
Yeah, I'd like to. If I was picking the tunes, of course, I would have picked some others. I think I'd picked a few serious songs, like Walking Down Death Row. Walking down death row, I sang for 3 men headed for the chair. Walking down death row, I sang of lives and loves in other years. Walking down death row, I sang of hopes that used to be. Through the bars into each separate cell, yes, I sang to 1 and 2 and 3. If you'd only stuck together, you'd not be here. If you could have loved each other's lives, you'd not be sitting here. And if only this you could believe, you might still be reprieved. Second verse says, walking down death row, I turned a corner and found to my surprise, there were women there as well with babies in their arms before my eyes. Walking down death row, I sang again of hopes that used to be, but the thought of that contraption down the hall, waiting for whole families, 1 dozen, 2 or 3. If you'd only stuck together, you'd not be here. If you could have loved each other's, if you could have loved another's child as well as your own, you'd not be sitting here. And if only this you could believe, you might still be reprieved. Walking down death row, I concentrated singing to the young. That's what I've done all my life. Sang in schools and summer camps and colleges. I sang of hopes that flickered still. I tried to mouth each separate human tongue. Walking down death row, I sang again of hopes that still might be. Singing, singing, singing down death row. To each separate human cell, 1 billion, 2 or 3, or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 now. If we'd only stick together, we'd not be here. If we could love each other's lives, we'd not be sitting here. And if only this we could believe, we might still be reprieved.
Do you think he should have been a little more topical then, or you would have preferred?
I think he should have been a little serious. Now it's true, we shall overcome serious, and keep your eyes on the prize is serious. But these are all completely hopeful songs, and you might occasionally step down and say, let's not be overly hopeful, let's be a little realistic. I think there's a 50-50 chance there'll be a human race here in 100 years. I'm not quite as pessimistic as Kurt Vonnegut. You've read him.
Yep.
He thinks there's a chance of a snowball in hell that there'll be a human race here. My father was an old scholar. He was over-optimistic all his life. First about one thing, then about another. But in his 80s, he was deeply pessimistic. He said, I can't persuade scientists. They have the most dangerous religion in the world. Did I tell you this story?
No.
He said, the scientist I'm talking to says, Charlie, I don't have a religious belief. I base all my actions on observation, double-checked around the world, as all science should be, and then draw logical conclusions. Oh no, says my father. Haven't you observed there are insane, power-hungry people in the world? Is it logical to put in the hands the ability to destroy the world? The scientist, but you're attacking all science. If I didn't discover these things, somebody else would. Yes, said my father, if you didn't rape this woman, somebody else would, so why not? The scientist, you've no right to ask questions like this. And my father shouts after them as they disappear, face it, you think that an infinite increase in empirical information is a good thing. Can you prove it? Of course you can't. Of course, then my father turns to me with an ironic smile. He says, of course, if I'm right, perhaps the committee that told Galileo to shut up was correct. All you can do is laugh. However, if he was alive, he died about 25 years ago, if he was alive, I'd argue with him. Remember, Hegel says there's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And the synthesis is in the song Turn, Turn, Turn. There's a time for this and a time for that. And there was a time when your ancestors and my ancestors all had to be good killers. The ones who were not good killers didn't have descendants. Like when our ancestors first left Africa and went up into Europe, they found the Neanderthals there. And the Neanderthals were much stronger, only about 5'4" in height, but they could leap higher and hit harder, and if one Neanderthal meets one human on the trail, there's no doubt who would live and who would die. But about 6,000 or 10,000 years later, there were no more Neanderthals in the world. They haven't found one Neanderthal skeleton less than 24,000 feet old. My scenario is always up at one end of the valley is a Neanderthal tribe, and at the other end is a human tribe. Now the humans have got big brains and probably better verbal communication, better knowledge of numbers. And they say, look, we're gonna fool them. They'll see only 3 of us and they'll charge at us. But you, 7 of you hide behind those bushes and 7 of you hide behind those rocks. And when they start charging me, I'll go, whoo, and that instantaneously you come out and attack them from both sides and we'll fool them. That kind of thing.
So are we the Neanderthals now, or?
Well, they don't think there were any, there's never been such a supreme species on Earth. And we're far more than there ever should be. This is a statistic I got from a little environmental magazine. If you weighed all the vertebrate life on Earth, don't count clams or worms or slugs, but all the vertebrate life, fish, birds, animals, people, our pets, and the animals we eat, and the birds we produce chicken farms, chicken factories. Add them all up and then divide them into 2. The wild animals, fish and birds, and the humans and our pets and our food. Humans would be 98% by weight, and the rest, all the wild, 2% by weight. 10,000 years ago, the figures were exactly reversed. Humans were 2%, and all animals were 98%. Well, you can see this can't keep going on forever. Nothing like fails like success.
Do you think that in the 70 years you've been working, fighting the good fight, that you've made a difference in getting people to realize that?
I know I've made a difference. This Springsteen record got me more letters within the last few weeks. I usually have too many letters, but they've just come in like a bushel. And one guy told me how he was a student in a southern college when I came to sing there with Odetta. And he found himself singing We Shall Overcome at the end and holding hands with a black woman next to me. He had never held hands with a black person before. He'd always called them the N-word. And one thing led to another. He's never been exactly an activist. He makes a living as a psychotherapist. But he says, I now argue with family and friends. What a great thing, the civil rights movement. And he says, I thank you for getting me started, Pete. I'm going to keep his letter. I'm even going to Xerox it and send it to some of my family. I'm very proud of it.
He saw you with Odetta back in the 60s then?
Yeah.
Okay. Is anyone doing what you were doing now?
Oh.
Who are your heirs today?
Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. They just don't get on the radio any more than I got on the radio. They don't get on TV any more than I got on TV. The time I got on was the exception proves the rule when I got on for the Smothers Brothers.
Sort of, right?
You remember that, don't you?
Yes. They censored your line, didn't they? The last
They scissored out of the tape the song, Waist Deep in the Big Muddy. However, the Smothers Brothers went to the print media, you all, and they got publicity, said CBS is censoring Seeger's best song and is censoring our best jokes. Finally, this was in October of '67, and in late January '58, CBS maybe got all the publicity out of it they wanted. And they said, okay, he can sing it. And I flew out to California a week later in early February, And I sang several other soldier songs, John Brown Body, and a song I knew from World War II. Did you ever hear of the D-Day Dodgers? A Scottish folklorist named Hamish Henderson wrote it when he was in the British 8th Army in Italy. And it's an absolute genius of a song. Funny at one place and deeply tragic in other places, and quite angry in other places. And then I ended with Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, and this time only one station cut it, I think in Detroit.
You're right, just Detroit. How about anyone on the radio or TV today? Are anyone doing what you were doing back then?
Well, Amy Goodman, but she's not a musician. She'll get a musician on though occasionally. And there's little stations. Like across the river is what they call a community radio station. And it's kept alive by volunteers and one and a half paid people. And they, everybody in the town listens to it. And, oh, the electricity they get from a dam in the backyard. They live on the hillside, and the electricity that sends their message out is from this dam. And when I went over to speak to them, Granny D came. You know about her. I told you about her, didn't I? Oh, she gave a wonderful speech. She said, this editor said he could give us publicity 3 inches in one column. I said, oh, give us 5 inches. He said, no, I think 3 inches is enough. And Granny said, as a woman, I can tell you, less than 5 inches is not enough.
I asked you this, I want to ask you, the hip hop artists, they're doing somewhat what you did
Yeah.
back then in terms
Sure.
of topical. Do you appreciate that?
Sure, of course, I have to confess I don't usually listen to records, never have, never in my life. Oh no, I did when I had a job, I was supposed to listen to records. Hiya. I was working in the Library of Congress, and the man said, here's 1,000 records, I don't have time to listen to them all. You listen to them all, and then tell me which 100 I should listen to. And that's when I became a big fan of Uncle Dave Macon, who recorded some 300 songs in the 20s and 30s. He'd sung on riverboats in the 1890s. And then when they started the Grand Ole Opry, he became one of their standbys.
But you don't listen to today's music at all?
I don't have time.
Yeah. You say you don't have time.
Is that a dog or a chicken?
It's 3 dogs.
It's bear dogs.
When you say you don't have time, is it just...
I got chores to do, mow the lawn, clean leaves out of ditches, shovel gravel, split firewood, stack it, and help my wife, who is a genius of a cook. She really is. To say that Toshi's a good cook is like saying Louis Armstrong was a good trumpeter. But I'm a good dishwasher.
You're still active against the war, too, right?
Oh, I sing songs from time to time.
Where did I read that you still go out with your peace sign on the road, and do you
Yeah.
just do that too?
That actually was, I was only there alone briefly. A whole batch of other people joined me. Every Saturday between 12 and 2, this little demonstration takes place. It was started by a teacher here in Beacon who's a member of the Baha'i Church. And he started it 2 years ago. And some people come regularly every Saturday. I make it maybe once a month. But I was there early one day and before anybody else was, and that's when John saw me.
Are you comfortable being sort of America's folky emeritus,
No.
the happy old man?
I would
image?
just as soon I was not so well known. However, I've blown my cover, so I'll try and do the best I can. Books have been written about me, but they're not all very good. One says, all through the 50s, Seeger was worried about his career. I never gave a shit about my career. If you think of career meaning fame and fortune. I was concerned about what I called the attempt to frighten America into silence. And a lot of people were frightened into silence. I call them the frightened 50s. But then came the scintillating 60s. And the most important job, I could have kicked the bucket in 1960. The most important job I did was go from college to college to college to college to college, one after the other. Usually small ones. The big state colleges, I didn't get into them until the 1960s, but in the 1950s, I'd go from Oberlin to Antioch to Allegheny to Carleton to Reed College and so on. And I showed the kids that there was a lot of great music in this country that they never played on the radio. Bob Dylan heard me when I was up in his part of the world. I thought it was at Wisconsin, but he says no, it was Minnesota. Maybe he's right.
This is when you were blacklisted, you did the college, or even
Well,
before that?
I was blacklisted from radio and television work, but I made a good living going from college to college.
Right, but I mean, that's when you, after you went before HUAC, and that's
No,
when you
that's right.
started doing the college
HUAC
stuff?
was right in the middle of this.
Okay.
Actually, I was just getting started. The first college I went to was Oberlin in 1953.
Okay,
2 years later, the House committee questioned me, but all they did was give me free publicity. It's a joke in show business. Don't care what they say about me as long as they spell my name right. And I call it cultural guerrilla tactics. If the John Birch Society picketed me, all they did was sell more tickets.
anybody against you now?
Oh, I'm sure there are. But I don't know. I don't know where they are.
What I meant before was your public image now is
Oh, it's
very happy and affable, and you
shameful. I'm so respectable.
you are very respectable, and you really did fight the good fight, and you paid a personal price in the 50s and the 60s.
I made a living. My wife never was short of money for gas or food for the kids. In the beginning, it was pinch. I remember in '54 going to San Francisco, and a friend of mine said he'd see if he could get some jobs for me. And he said he thought he could get $25 a piece, whether I sang at a school or wherever. And I said, well, I got to get 4 jobs a day then, because if I can't get $100 a day, I can't pay for my plane ticket and still send something home to my wife. So I sang in one school in the early morning, another school in the middle of the day, another school in the afternoon, and somewhere else in the evening. Made $100.
You mentioned how your father just went suddenly. Are you just going to go like that until you just stop going? Is that
Oh,
what
yeah.
you're going to do?
Right now, though, I'm turning down a lot of jobs because I've got to get a book rewritten. I came out with a songbook of all the songs I'd ever tried to write, and it sold a few copies, but then I found there were hundreds of little mistakes and 3 or 4 big mistakes. So I said, don't sell any more, I'll revise it. But that was 9 years ago. And finally, people said, when is this revised version coming out? I said, next year. But this is next year, and I've got to get it done.
This is where all the flowers come,
Yeah.
right?
The subtitle is Stories and Songs and the Folk Process. That's my father's phrase. He says, don't argue, is it a folk song? Just know that for thousands of years, the folk process has been in every field of culture. Cooks rearrange old recipes for new stomachs. Lawyers rearrange old laws for new citizens. And musicians rearrange old tunes for new words. Or as I did with Turn, 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 I rearranged old words for a new tune. I asked Julius Lester, a friend of mine, when were these words written? And he looks in a big book with a lot of fine print, says 252 BCE. Julius is an African American, but he became officially a Jew. He's a scholar, and he got fascinated by the Bible.
I wanted to ask you, that bushel of letters you're getting since the album, are any of them people who had not heard of you before or didn't know what you're...
No, they're mostly from people who knew of me, just
Yeah.
saying, glad you're getting this publicity. So,
Are you glad?
well, yes and no, as I say. It's,
Yeah.
I could have come down here cheerfully stacked wood with Ron Bell over there. Instead, I'm sitting here yakking.
I won't be long now, but you did make me promise last week that I would ask you about your politician friend who said, Pete, if we don't grow, we're going to die. And you made me promise to put that in the story, so I want to ask
Yeah.
you.
John Ballow used to be a shop steward in a big NBC plant. They printed the cardboard boxes for Ritz crackers and so on. Then the plant moved to South America or someplace, and John went into politics and for 20 years represented Beacon in the Dutchess County Legislature. And a couple of years ago, I was talking to him. He says, Pete, if you don't grow, you die. I was protesting because the population of this valley is doubling every 20 years about. And you can't double forever. I have a song, you double 10 times, you're up to 1,000. Double another 10 times, you're up to 1,000,000. Double another 20 times, you're over 1 trillion. And so we can't double forever. But he said, no, Pete, if we can't grow, we die. I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning thinking, if that's true, doesn't it follow that the quicker we grow, the sooner we die? I mean, think of it. If it's true that if we don't grow, we die, doesn't it mean that sooner or later we can't grow anymore? That means we die. Wouldn't it be wise right now to start talking, is it possible to grow in generosity, grow in wisdom, grow in humor, good humor? I often think maybe if there's a human race here, we may be saved by a sense of humor.
You think 50-50? What's your bet? Are we going to make it for 100 years?
God only knows what the future is going to be. But there's an analogy I thought of years ago. I put it at the end of my book. Imagine a big seesaw, and one end's on the ground because it's got a big basket half full of rocks in it. At the other end is a basket 1/4 full of sand. And some of us got teaspoons. We're trying to fill it up. And most people are kind of scoffing at us. They say, people like you have been trying for thousands of years, but it's leaking out of that basket. Don't you see? You're wasting your time. All we can say, well, it is leaking out, but we're getting more people with teaspoons all the time. And we think that one of these days, that basket up there is going to be so full, that whole seesaw will go zoop in the other direction. People will say, gee, how did it happen so suddenly? Us and all our little teaspoons over a long period of time. Of course, we have to keep using them because it still is leaking out. And if we just sit there and rest, pretty soon the seesaw will go back in the other direction again.
So how long are you going to keep your teaspoon going? Just another 10 years or so? Or?
No, forever, unless we can figure some way of taking out those big rocks out of the other end. That might be possible too.
One last area, the Hudson River, right here.
Yeah.
You happy? I mean, it's a lot cleaner than when you started to Sloop Clearwater.
Do you think, is it possible we could walk out a little bit
Sure.
by the river?
Yeah.
And you can-
Want to walk and
We can do it. And then they get busy in here. These guys been sitting wondering way far around. I'm going to quit talking so they can get something done.
You want to just talk about the river as a walk? Is that okay?
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's walk out and make
sure.
Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you for being quiet. Success. The teenagers in the club says, we ought to make that in the park. And I said, yeah, but where's the money coming from? They said, well, they'll find the money. And they got about 300 signatures, and we took them to City Hall. And City Hall just smiled and said, lovely idea, but where's the money? And they weren't discouraged. Next year they came back with another 300 signatures. Now we had 600. And next year another 300 signatures. So it was 900. And the next year the Citizens Advisory Council in Beacon voted the next money that comes in to Beacon for community improvement will go for a riverfront park. Well, I was cynical. I said, I'll believe it when I see it. But they got an engineering firm, and 3 years later, in 1980, let's see, that was some, let's see, if it was 71, 10 years. 10 years after we started the Sloop Club, 10 years, they spent $800,000. I don't know where they got it. Some probably from Washington, some from Albany, some from the county, maybe in who knows where else. And it's been well used. You got basketball courts there, and the Sloop Club has a strawberry shortcake festival there on June 11th, and a corn festival. That'll be down here. Corn festival is usually held here on August 13th. Oh, the beginning of August, they're going to have the third swim across the river. They start at Newburgh, and the first time we did it, it was 60 people. Last year it was 100 people. We'll see what happens this summer.
It's nice though that people can swim in the river now, don't
Yeah.
you think?
And our new project is trying to see if we can put in a floating swimming pool. It'll go up and down with the tide, but stay the same depth. Now, the trial pool this summer is a small one, just 20 feet in diameter and 18 inches deep. So it's for toddlers. And the parents will sit around the perimeter on benches, and there'll be a lifeguard there who knows CPR, because a kid needs only to be under the water for 20 seconds. It can drown. And this is the big thing. We'll have insurance, but no matter how much insurance we have, we do not want to have a single drowning.
Where's the pool going to be?
It'll be on the north side of the park, on the bridge side of the park.
They had those floating pools when you were a boy, didn't they?
Down in New York City, they had about 30 floating swimming pools. They were made of wood, and they were not taken out of the water. They were towed to outer New York Bay in the winter. Jacob Reese, you know who he was. Yep. He has pictures of them in one of his. Now the big one, if the little one solves all the problems, they have some floating pools in Europe, but they don't have the exact same problems. There's a fish called the round-nosed sturgeon, and it's an endangered species. And if this floating pool catches even one fish, it's a no-no. So we think we've designed a pool which will not catch fish, but we'll try it out this summer.
Are you happy about the river? Is that a
Oh, I'm happy
successful-
that it's halfway clean. It all depends how you judge the pollution. The PCBs are down, but there's still some of them. And on the other hand, you could drink a barrel full of water and not get as much PCB as you get in one fish, because the fish concentrate the chemical in their fishy little bodies.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you thought that was one area of success if you go from back when you started to Sloop Clearwater to now. There is progress.
Oh yeah,
And yet the valley's getting more crowded, it's growing.
yeah, that's right. The good and the bad are so tangled up in this world, all you can do is laugh if you don't cry. It wasn't, it was the real estate business when once we started cleaning up the river, said, wow, we can make billions of dollars selling real estate in the Hudson Valley. Hey, government, give them good train service. Before this, the trains were slow and dirty and late, and about 10 years ago, 15, whatever it was, now they're fast and they're on time and they're clean and frequent. We used to have one little train in the morning and one little in the evening. Now every hour, big train every hour. This is probably one of them.
You still drive, right?
Yeah, short distances. I don't drive at night and long distances.
You don't hop trains anymore like you used to or anything?
Haven't hopped a train in 60 years.
Think you still could?
Probably not. I don't think they let empty boxcars go around like they used to. We see freight trains on the other side of the river from my house, big long ones, 100 cars, and I have not noticed empty boxcar doors being open. So you'd have to climb on top. Hudson River Paddle, it's called, and about 50 kayaks and canoes start at Albany, and 10 days later they're in New York. And they arrange to have a party in a different town every night. They usually go to Cold Spring, because the guy who runs a restaurant there, and he opens up his lawn, and all 50 of them can have a good meal. And people in Cold Spring open up their homes so they can get showers and clean up. And depending on the tide, they take off early or late the next morning. But there's another train from New York. As I said, it used to be one car in the evening and one car in the morning. Now it's like that every hour.
Progress.
Progress.
Hallelujah.
No, I gotta say, you gave me a lot of time, and I thank you. I'm all set, but
Yeah.
thanks for talking to me.
Now,
Well,
good luck to get them free as far as I'm concerned.
Are you
Somebody's
guys
paying for him somewhere, though. That's great.
Man's chest, 60.
I can't remember that.
Oh, that day was beautiful, though. Thank you very much
Yo
for
ho
everything.
ho
For
and a
much more
bottle
than
of
that,
rum.
though. Thank you.
Okay.
What is the name of that newspaper song?
Newspapermen meet such interesting people, and WAMC has the record someplace, but they only play the first verse. They don't play the prostitution verse.
What was he talking about? What did you say?
No, they've had mine. So even though they might have only sold 100 copies back then, they've got it.
They do have it. What's the name of the company?
Bear Family.
Bear Family. B-E-A-R.
Yeah. What?
You were here before they built the Newburgh Beacon. It's an old bridge, right?
No, bridge was built in '64, about 7 years before the club started. It was only 5 years before the Clearwater first sailed up the
You've been
river.
a Beacon for
57 years. Hi. Oh, I should sing, except my voice is so bad. Hi.
That's an easy song. You can sing. It's in your range.
Newspapermen meet such interesting people. They know the lowdown, now it can be told. I'll tell you quite reliably, off the record, about some charming people I have known. For I meet politicians and grafters by the score. Killers plain and fancy, it's really quite a bore. Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people. They wallow in corruption, crime, and gore. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, city desk. Hold the press, hold the press. Extra, extra, read all about it. It's a mess, meets the test. So on. The last verse they never do play on the radio, though. Publishers are such interesting people. Their policy's an acrobatic thing. They claim to represent the common people. It's funny Wall Street never has complained. For publishers must worry, for publishers must go to working folks for readers and to big shots for their dough. Publishers are such interesting people. It could be prostitution, I don't know. Ting-a-ling-ling, circulation, ting-a-ling-ling, advertising, get those readers, get that payoff. What a headache, what a mess. Publishers are such interesting people. Let's give 3 cheers for freedom of the press. The song was written by a working newspaperman. His name was Vern Partlow. He's long dead. P-A-R-T-L-O-W. Vern with no E. V-E-R-N. Vern Partlow.
It's a nice song.
Newspapermen meet such interesting people.